What's up, everybody? How y'all doing today? Welcome to another episode of a Stoked podcast. I am your host, Javon O. Stokes, aka the most opinionated man in comics. And I'm glad to see you guys. This is let's see, I'm trying to figure out this. We have a show. Sorry about that. We have a show, let's see, next week, and then we have another show, and then we have a break because I need a vacation, guys. I need a vacation. Here's my co-host who's decided to be mad late. I don't know why he seems to forget that you know, the show starts at 8. Hasn't changed. It's only changed one time.
I thought it was changing soon again.
No, we're not doing there's no way I'm doing 9 o'clock. All right. No way, no way how. So yeah, we got a great guest, and we're glad that you guys are on. What's up, Savion? Congrats to Savion Ross. Just wrapped up his sophomore year.
Very nice, very
Long
good,
time
very good.
viewer. We're very happy to hear that. What's up, Kenji? How you doing? All right, we're not gonna keep him. We're not gonna keep our guest waiting. He's a busy man. I mean, this man is the COO of Second Sight Publishing. He's also a Glyph nominated award artist, Glyph Award nominated writer, with quite a few books to his credit, including The Protector. Let's welcome and give a warm A Stoke podcast round of applause to the one and only Marcus H. Roberts.
What's going on, man? Glad to be here.
Yeah, man. What's going on? What's going on? We should have had you on a while back. I don't know what happened, but
I don't know what happened either, man. But
you're a busy
it's
dude.
all a timing thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you.
No,
been
blame Javon. Do the right thing. Blame Javon.
If anything, it was on me because the brother reached out to me once before, and we were supposed to set something up, and then he hit me back like, "Yo, man, we're supposed to set something up."
I just thank you for letting the world know, because I know I need a secretary and an assistant who to do all this stuff. And I was like, wait a minute, did I talk to him? I know I talked to him, and then I was like, wait a minute, I did talk to him. But we glad we got you in here, man.
Blame Javon.
That's the story of my life, so it's okay. It's all right. Sorry. I take the slings and arrows so that no one else has to. Welcome, man. Welcome. How you doing, man?
Oh man, I'm living life and loving it.
Now, congrats. You got a nominate for a Glyph this like recently, right?
This year, yeah,
Right,
the ceremony is next week.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Congratulations, man. Congratulations. It's a wonderful award, and I'm happy for you. I'm proud of you. And it's always nice to have a little something else on your resume, a little something to put by your name.
Oh yeah, well, as it has been said before, this glyph is like an Oscar for us Black comic book creators.
Hey, I'm trying to get them to look at me.
with,
So I'm happy
with
for you.
with the history behind it and everything, man. When you have that understanding of it, it's like this is really truly an honor, and to have the nominations that I do have, I'm just extremely excited.
And we're happy for you as well. So yeah, we're gonna get into it. As most viewers of our show are aware. Sorry, there's something on my laptop. I'm scratching it off like I got ACD, man. OCD, excuse me. ACD is a band, ain't it? Is it
Yes.
ACDC, right? Yeah, whatever.
ACDC, yes.
All right.
Highway to hell.
Yes. So as most viewers of our show are aware, I usually start the show off around with the same similar question for everybody. But when did your love of comics begin?
Oh, I am what's referred to as a generational comic book reader. My older brother, my father, and like my father's first cousins and relatives were in the comics. So I've been in the comics all my life. It was one of the first books that I learned to read along with everything else. And also, just having the type of upbringing that I had with my parents encouraged my imagination. So, they didn't mind me getting the comics as many as I could afford. Back then they were a little cheaper, so you know I could take 50 cent take 50 cent to the comic book store and walk out of there with at least 3 or 4 books.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I miss those days. Like I would, go down with $1. If you went down with $1, you got you could get quite a few books. Like that's those days I miss. I really do miss them. Did you have any favorite books, or were you just any comic you could get your hands on?
Well, I because I started reading the books that like my father read when he was a teen. I started off reading the war books, the Sergeant Rocks, and
Okay,
those guys. Once my brother got into comics, he started off with DC, but he gravitated more toward John Carter and Doc Savage and
okay,
uh, I started out probably the first comic book I remember buying was an Avengers book. When the Masters of Evil attacked the
under
mansion
siege.
and beat the hell out of Jarvis, like I remember that book just it stands out. But one thing that my father did was uh, right around the end of the 60s. I was born in 65, given my age. In the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s, the Golden Legacy comic books started coming out.
Oh, Golden Legacy.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
so he put me on to the Golden Legacy, and it was kind of hard going back to the mainstream books because you had the absence of black faces.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I still maintained reading comics because I always enjoyed it. Always been a big thing to feed my imagination. So
So before I'm going to let Jamari go, but one question: what about the art? What about the art form? Do you draws you to it?
it is specifically the make believe because the comic book stories are fantasy. They aren't real. And
Right.
because they weren't real, because they aren't real, and you're able to just let your imagination fly, and it's all right there on page in color or black and white, whichever one you prefer. That's always drawn me to it.
Okay. All right. I can agree with that. I can agree. Go ahead, Jamari.
What about comics inspired you to shift over into going from a consumer to a creator?
I knew I was going to be doing something in comic books all my life,
Really?
whether it was writing or I couldn't draw, so being an artist just never entered my mind. But whether it was writing or doing what I'm doing now, publishing, I knew I was going to be doing something in comics. And, and as I said, and I specifically mentioned the Golden Legacy, because my, I came from a family wherein you know positivity, the positive role models, we searched them out and they were always presented. So Fitzgerald Publishing, that was a
Okay.
big role model to see this black business and how it thrived. As I, went through school and got to even in college, right before what we call the black comic explosion, I was following this one particular artist, and when he started his own company, I was right there with him. This particular artist was Reggie Byers. He
Okay.
was drawing Robotech at the time, and this other
Ooh,
title, Shuriken. And he came up with his company, Victory Productions, and this is like '88. So, those type of role models, that type of inspiration, always kept comics in the forefront of my mind and my desire to want to do something in comics.
Okay.
That just never left me.
So let's. I wanted to talk to you. So you grew up in a time you were reading comics during the time where it was a lot of like, how do I put this? There was a lot of like black exploitation. There was the rise of Luke Cage and his Sweet Christmas. the Black Panther was just coming around that time, I believe. How did that affect you? Like, were you able to like get in on the ground floor? Were you coming in late? Like, how did that work?
Well, Luke Cage, for example, no black person I knew talked like that. So it was hard to get into the Luke Cage comic books.
Right.
And with Black Panther, I hate to hurt some people's feelings about this, but Panther was created by a white creator, a white writer, and he was written in that manner.
Right.
So even though he was T'Challa, the chieftain of this black tribe, he was written the way he was written. It was Eurocentric.
Okay.
So, understanding these things, even as a young person, I didn't really gravitate too much toward those books. Now, because of their value and because of their not just their financial value, but their historical value, I've begun to collect them. I've gone back and collected the Luke Cage series and gone back and collected the Jungle Action books and the original Kirby books. So uh, but when I was young, it's just something that I don't know. They didn't attract me, which would be sad because when I started school, my class was one of the first classes that blacks and whites went to school together. We were right there at the cusp of integration. So, like whenever I would be around the white comic book readers, they would always want me to be Luke Cage or want me to be the Black Panther. And I'm thinking Iron Man or somebody of that nature. And they're like, no, no, because he's white. So, you know, having that so pointedly thrown at you, you become self-conscious. You become conscious of the fact that there's only a limited number of black comic book characters in these books, and these characters fit either one stereotype or the other.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a child of the '80s. Even in the '80s, it wasn't exactly great, but it was more of a, I'm trying to think. I was one of those kids where I was just happy to see any black character. So even if they sounded
Yeah.
crazy, I was just like, all right, I'll ride with you. They'll figure it out at some point. So what characters did you love though?
Well, I was a big Conan the Barbarian fan.
Okay.
And even though the original creator of Conan may have been, a racist pig, the way the character was written when I was growing up, he wasn't, he didn't have those same racial overtones. Yeah, he was just this big dude trying to make it, whether as a thief or a king or whatever the situation called for. Just a big bad dude with a sword. So I was always attracted to that. And for years, I collected the Savage Sword of Conan, the big black and white magazine. So I actually have hundreds of issues of those. I collected those up into the 90s.
All right, sorry about that. I had to do some dad stuff.
Oh, trust me, I know that. Know that feeling.
Nope,
Been
the
there,
clock
done
never
that.
stops. Never stops. Go ahead, Jamari.
So you said you collected Conan. It seems like there was a lot of sci-fi fantasy that was in your background for all of your inspiration. How did that transition over for you as you started creating your own work?
Well, the comic books that I read and the stuff that I write come from actually two different places. The
Okay.
stuff that I write is mostly influenced by the television and movies that I saw.
Oh,
But the comic books, as you learn from reading comics and being in comics for years or decades, there's no such thing as an original comic book story, not even an original comic book character. It's all a retelling. So it's up to you, the reader, to get into it as much as you want to. If want to critique what it is you're reading, you probably won't get any enjoyment out of anything you read. But if you're just reading it for the sheer enjoyment, reading it for how it it stokes your imagination, you know, even appreciating the words or the art of the story. If you're reading it for that type of thing, then you find enjoyment in reading comics, even if you're reading a retelling of the same character.
Okay.
You know, you just enjoy reading it.
Right.
So the comics weren't really my inspiration for my storytelling. It's more the television shows I watch, the movies that I've watched, even the real life situations that I've gone through that I draw from to make creativity happen.
So
Okay.
my next question,
Can
I'm
we
curious.
stay? I want to stay in the journey though. I don't want to go to his professional stuff just yet. We because I want to give you. So I want people to get to know a little bit about where you're coming from before we get to when you putting out some fabulous books. So I did want to talk to you because you are there aren't a lot of black creators in general, right? Like in comics. I mean, there are a lot of us, but the majority of us are in the indie scene. But you have you can draw on like, hey, I saw it from this to this. So how do you view the state of comics now regarding diversity to like, do you believe that we need a little more help, or do you think we're on the right path, or like what do you how do you feel about the current state of diversity within comics?
The first thing you have to understand is comics is a business. The innocence of my early time reading comics is gone. Comics is a business. So looking at things from that business standpoint, you don't look at readership per se, you look at consumers. Your readers are consumers. You look at units, your comic books become units. So now you're looking at units, you're moving to consumers. You look at you start breaking down different charts and trying to find uh, these different people that will buy these books. It becomes a business.
Right.
So diversity has to be something that an effort is made toward, because it's easy to get lost in the business. It's easy to get to look at your readers as consumers and your books as units versus looking at the readers as readers who are looking for inspiration, who are looking for a role model, who are, they're looking for some escape from their current situation in the book. And it is easier for them to be attached to this book if there are people in the book that looks like them. If these people are going through situations, even if they are made up situations, if they're experiencing these same things, you know, when you start looking at the comics in that manner, then you have to make the effort for the diversity. You have to make the effort for inclusion. And the thing is, these companies don't look at it like that. They see consumers, they see units. And because they think of things in those terms, diversity and equity and inclusion gets thrown out of the door, because those things are outliers in the whole scale or scheme of consumerism.
So do you look at it as more almost like a charade, like this is just dollars, like y'all don't really want to do it but you have to do it?
It's not a charade, but you have to understand that for a company and they're thinking bottom line, they're thinking successful product, they have to know I have to have a certain segment of this population buying into my product. And how can I get this certain segment of the population buying into my product? And those are the terms that they approach this when they produce their product.
Makes sense, makes sense, makes sense. All right, go ahead, Jamal.
So if you're dealing with the business aspect of things, how do you, what would be your suggestions to reconcile that for, for diversity?
Well, along with the effort, there has to be companies that have dedicated themselves to that diversity. That was one of the things that really made Milestone stand out was when their books came out in the 90s. Even though it was inclusive, we saw blacks in roles that we typically didn't see them in comics. Just the whole diversity aspect was big. They made an effort, and because they made that effort, they got positive results. So the the effort has to be made. It has to be something that is organic. It can't be forced, and it has to come from companies that are dedicated to doing that. Because we're at a point now where even the average consumer knows the real from the fake, and they actually willingly either go in blindly or knowledgeably to get it, but they know the real from the fake. So they know stuff that's organic. They know stuff that's not forced.
Well, with that in mind, I would guess the conclusion would be maybe the indie scene is the answer for that if you are looking for inclusion.
Well, think about the indie scene in terms of 50 years ago, and I hate to go back that far, but think about the indie scene in terms of 50 years ago. It really arose because of its resistance toward the Comics Code Authority. The Comics Code Authority came out and started regulating what should be in books, what you can't put in, what can be on the cover, what material you can have in the books. The Comics Code Authority was the new sheriff in town, and it put everybody in place. But you had a group of creators, of writers, of artists who said, "I won't be tied down." So now you get the whole underground comics movement, and you start getting comics done by creators, stories written by creators that are unfiltered. It's straight from their imagination. It's not regulated. It's including whatever type of character, whatever type of topic that they can think of. And you actually do see a little more diversity, but you also see the appearance now of more black characters.
Now, do you?
So
So I'm sorry. I didn't mean. My bad. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead. Go
that's
ahead. I was
okay.
listening. I was listening, and I had a question. I was like, "Oh man, let me ask the
Well,
question."
go ahead and shoot the question then. Go
No,
ahead and
I
shoot
was
the
just going to
question.
say, like, do you think that the milestone initiative was? Because I always felt like the milestone initiative was very much like, how do I put it? It was like an indie energy brought to mainstream. Like I've always felt that way, and I do. How do you look at? Do you feel like that was the changing point? That was the turning point for how diversity was looked at in in comics, or do you feel like it happened earlier, later? Like, what's your opinion on it?
It definitely happened earlier, and we can't overlook or minimize the importance of what happened in the 90s with black comic book creators, with black comic publishers, with the whole black comic movement. There was an explosion in the 90s of black comics and black comic book publishers and creators that only now, and I believe in cyclic occurrences. What we're experiencing now in 2023 is cyclic from what we experienced in 1993. But what we experienced in 1993 was actually cyclic from what we were experiencing in 1963 when we started seeing more and more black faces on the covers of books. You saw Bill Cosby in the I Spy gracing the cover of a comic book, all 6 issues. he was on the cover of that book. That was a first. You got Lobo coming out of that period.
Lobo.
So the things that started happening in 1963 carrying on, it's cyclic. So we're in this other cyclic period in 2023. So what was happening in the 90s? We saw comic book companies like Anaya that was so they had titles that were selling 40, 50, 60,000 copies. We had a title that was written and drawn by a couple of black guys that sold 1 million copies. A black comic book tribe, 1 million copies. This was in the 90s. We saw the emergence of Milestone, and we saw just how powerful an entity that they could be as a black publishing company. I mean, they are the inspiration for a lot of my friends who are in publishing now. They are in that Milestone initiative that you mentioned. That is only proof of what the power that they still maintain as a comic book publisher in the industry, that they can have this initiative, that they can provide opportunities for up and coming independent guys to get on this mainstream level where we as comic book creators want to be. We know we, in order to see that modicum of success that we desire, it's that mainstream level that we need to be on. So Milestone is saying, "Hey, I'm giving people the opportunity with my initiative." You see black publishers that are happening now in the mainstream. Advent, for one, Tony Cottrell. Uh,
Shout out, Tony.
Second Sight Publishing with Bradley Golden and myself. Uh, I believe Godhood Comics, Tyler Forrest Martin. They are scheduled and set to start publishing in the mainstream along with Concrete Comics. So you see this cyclic thing that's happening where there are these publishers that are making these big moves, not just on the independent scene, but now making strides in the mainstream.
Right, right. And I'm always happy too because we're getting a lot more guys that are like Marvel is looking more at, people of color, to do main books like Captain America with John Ridley, uh for whatever you feel about it. Quite a few other books are getting like black creators. What's her name? Is it Eve? Eve Ewing?
Eh,
I believe
Yes.
is doing Black Panther. Which I'm always happy when they put like black people doing Black Panther. I know it sounds silly, but
No, it makes
there,
sense.
well, there's a validity in the voice that you don't get when it's a white writer. I mean, there are some that are capable of doing it, but
Yeah. Well,
Al
depending
Ewing is
on
great, by the way. Al Ewing is a great Black Panther writer. I want him on the title, but sorry.
Well,
depending
exactly.
depending on what you are going for with the character. The thing that made Christopher Priest so bad on this Black Panther run was because he brought a certain culture into the Black Panther that hadn't been there before. There were great Black Panther stories that were being told, but he made Black Panther culturally relevant. After Christopher Priest, I mean, yeah, we've had some great writers, but when you think about Reginald Hudlin and what he did, and even though his Panther may have been more of a Western feel, it
Yeah.
was still culturally relevant what he did. Uh, whether you love or hate the Ta-Nehisi Coates run, he made it culturally relevant. And those are the things that, you know, not to discredit or to minimize the effort or greatness of some of the white writers who've written the character, but they just don't have it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I actually like Tanahashi Coates. Like the beginning of his run, I was down. I was down. I know a lot of people felt differently about it, but like I was right there for it. Like I loved it because, like you said, there was a culture to it. I do think Al. I think, as I said, Al Ewing is a white writer who does a fantastic Black Panther. Like if you've ever read the Ultimates, like
Yeah.
I be like this dude. I be like, you. I almost had to like double take. Like I was like, I kept looking like to check. Is he? Are we sure he's white? Like, cause like, are we positive? Go ahead, Jamari.
I was just saying it speaks to what Marcus was talking about earlier when the character was first introduced. You've got a character that's not created with the culture's best interest at hand when it was just to exist. They made him to fit a stereotype. And then when you give that character over to people that connect to the culture he's supposed to represent, like you said, it gives him an authenticity to him that most people wouldn't be able to. People
I
who are
think
not,
that for Luke Cage, I don't know if I agree that Black Panther was a stereotype.
maybe not a
Like,
direct stereotype, but he wasn't written.
I don't even think he was written as a stereotype. That's just my opinion. I don't.
Well, you
I don't
know
think.
what?
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Before the Falcon, every black hero from comic books inception was an African prince.
Okay.
Every black hero was not an African American, but an African prince. So every character that was written, every black character that was written or hero up until that point as an African American, because as proud as I am of my African heritage, I'm still here. I'm still American. So to have an African American character would be just as meaningful. But it wasn't like that until we saw the Falcon.
Okay. I got you. I got you. All
So
right. So
yeah,
let's.
there was a stereotype going. There was a denigration of the black man in America in the portrayal of the characters, even that were heroic in comics.
That's deep.
Didn't mean to get too deep on you, but
No, no, no.
you know,
I'm good. I'm
yeah,
good. I'm
yeah,
listening. I'm
yeah.
listening. I'm listening.
Just
I'm
looking at it
listening. I'm
for
listening.
what it is
I'm
and what
listening.
it
I'm listening.
was.
Um, man, we could. I want to come back to it, but now I want to come back to you professionally. What was your first published work?
Oh, the first published work was well, the first comic book I wrote in was actually Jennifer Ash's Dream Angel series. She did this big independent independent comic character battle. And initially, I put my character in along with some other people. And as the other people were dropped out but left their character, I ended up having to write other people's characters and ended up, instead of doing like, maybe 2 or 3 pages in one issue, ended up doing quite a few pages in 3 issues.
Okay. Before we get into deep, so talk to us about your writing process. Like, how do you go about it? Are you a full script, or do you do the Marvel method? Like, how do you what are you comfortable doing?
Well, I I am a writer, and I have been writing stuff for a long time,
Okay.
stuff other than comic books. I'm I'm a certified grant writer. I've written technical manuals. I've written menus. I've written biographies. Written articles. I'm a writer, so I don't really have one solid process that I may follow. Sometimes I do an outline. Sometimes I sit and I write as the story comes to me, as I'm inspired to write. Uh, Often I keep stuff logged in my head, and it takes me actually sitting down and putting it on paper. Uh, Sometimes I discuss the whole story out with somebody and then write the story out and then type up what I've written. So, I have a varied approach to it as it hits me.
Okay. Go ahead, Jamari.
So, dang, I forgot the question. I'd had the question earlier about some of the things that you were writing. Well, I actually want to know about the shows that inspire your writing, the things that you either grew up with or watch now that inspire the stuff that you create.
Well, at midnight on Saturday nights, and I know this is the same for a lot of people in a lot of states all over the country. But at midnight on Saturday nights, there used to be the creature feature that came on, uh, and I would watch those old black and white movies, The Mummy, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, all the old vampire Dracula movies. That, from those movies, but moving into moving into like the mid 70s, uh, one of my favorite scary movies was Phantasm. And if you've never seen Phantasm, uh, it's a story of the tall, thin man that robs bodies, steals bodies, and turns them into these little short minions, and they live in some other dimension. But uh, I actually was a big Twilight Zone fan, never missed an episode of the Twilight Zone. So it was things of that nature. Cold Shack. I used to love Cold Shack, the Night Stalker. And that
Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh yeah.
so
My mom,
I
my
just
mom was my mom was into all this everything you're telling me because so I ended up having to watch well not having to watching a lot of it. Like
well,
I've watched all those Twilight Zones. She had a what do you call it? A not a habit, a tradition of watching them every New Year's Eve.
I still do it. Uh, some of the shows I know I've seen 100 times, and it still hits me the same as it did when I first saw it. Like some of the shows I know the lines when they're getting ready to sing, and the show still hits me the same. But there were also things like Planet of the Apes, and with Planet of the Apes, just thinking about you know we didn't know it was the future then, but thinking about a whole planet where the humans are the captives. When I talk about being a generational comic book reader, my brother used to read this book from DC called Commandy,
Ah,
and
yeah,
then
the last boy.
yeah, so the Planet of the Apes greatly reminded me of that.
Okay, all right. Go ahead, Jamari.
Um, Planet of the Apes. So, I'm gonna let you go ahead and you got something. I'm gonna think on that. What you just
Okay.
said.
So it sounds like you're a horror buff. You like
Yeah,
horror movies. What about the genre do you enjoy?
I enjoy being scared.
Okay.
Just plain and simple. I enjoy being scared. I like the feel of chill bumps on my arms and the hair raising on the back of my neck. Uh, wondering what's around that dark corner. I mean, it's just something about those emotions that are just appealing to me. So, I like being scared. Even with the comic books, like I mentioned underground comic book movement, but I would read comic books from like Marvel and DC, the House of Mystery and the House of Secrets, the Crypt of Shadows and supernatural thrillers, those comics coming up as well. So I've been in the horror. That's just always been my thing. I like being scared. Uh, where I grew up at, there are two funeral homes and two graveyards right down the street from my house. And
Did you have to
my
walk home
God,
from school?
yeah, and I had to walk home from school, and the school was right across the street from one of the graveyards. But the thing was, my godmother had spoiled being scared of that stuff for me when I was a kid because she said the thing about the graveyard is everybody in there is dead.
Okay.
They can't bother you. They're dead. So that spoiled it right there. Now I got to use my imagination about dead people because real dead people can't do nothing to me because they're dead.
Yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it. That'll do it.
So that had a big influence, like with the Mississippi Zombie series that we publish. I like writing zombies because it's the animated dead, and you can do so much with zombies. And there's so many different types of zombies. They're varied around the world and from culture to culture. So you can do so much with them.
You prefer the ones that run or the ones that walk?
It depends on what the story is, because there are zombies or a type of zombie creature in African culture wherein they are only controlled by children, and they are not dead, but they are in this zombie state. So they walk, run, and do whatever, but they're only controlled by children.
I've never heard of that before. I gotta look into that.
Oh yeah. Once you start looking up the different creatures that we are familiar with, zombies, vampires, uh, even the Frankenstein monster. Frankenstein is not something that's new, even though the whole concept of putting the body parts together is. But Frankenstein would be considered a golem. It was an inanimate object brought to life. Golems are something that run through the Jewish culture
Right.
as they're called in times of trouble to protect the people. So even the idea of Frankenstein isn't new.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, I could talk about horror movies all day. I'm a horror movie guy. I will literally sit and watch horror movies in the middle of the day. I'm okay with it. I love them all. I love zombie movies. I like zombie movies because it's not really about the zombies. It's about the people.
Yeah,
It's about the people and how they react. And I always used to think, man, like I've said this before, I always used to think, man, like people can't be this stupid. But COVID changed everything for me. COVID proved every screenwriter that has ever lived that they were right. That the stupid person does exist, and the guy who panics and takes control, but he's really scared. That person exists.
yeah.
COVID changed everything for me. So it almost like renewed my appreciation for horror movies because I always be like, these people can't be this stupid. And
Well, I was just talking with a person the other day, and we were talking about the Key and Peele skit with the racist zombies because
yes,
th- yeah, I still rewatch that.
I
I
love that
th-
one. I
that
love,
was just too hilarious.
I
To
love that
see
one.
the zombie roll up the car window and lock the door. That was just that was too funny.
And the ending with the
So,
cookout was just like
yeah,
they're
yeah, like
so
come
good.
on.
They are so good at just the writing part. They're so good.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
so good. Oh my gosh. Jamar, did you have a question before? I was going to bring us a little closer to now and what you got currently with how did we get to Second Sight Publish?
Other than just kind of curious as to what would be like the ultimate scary story for you, or what would you pick in as a movie, your top horror movie?
Well, for me,
Mm-hmm.
the ultimate scary story. Uh, there was a movie. It actually was back in the '80s about a guy that got captured and stuck in a gray casket and buried alive,
Okay.
and that that is like the ultimate scary thing. I mean, you're buried alive.
There's a Ryan
Like,
Reynolds movie like that.
Thought it
like
was
what do you do? You're buried alive. So yeah, that's something that all I can't go in the MRI machine because as soon as they start sliding me in there, I start thinking buried alive. I'm like, yo, you gotta get me out of here. You gotta get me
Hey,
out.
I'm a little claustrophobic, so I understand. Like I told, there's a Ryan Reynolds movie called Buried, where the entire movie is just him in the coffin, and like
Yeah,
he's got like a cell phone, and he's talking to people trying to get him out, and they're la, da, 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 da. And like if you feel that, I would look that up if you haven't seen it.
I hadn't seen it, but I got to check that out.
Check it out. It is I enjoy it. I enjoy it. But it like to me, there are two things in the world that scare the bejesus out of me. It's it's being enclosed
Mhm.
and spiders. And if you got either of those two, I can tolerate watching movies about enclosure. I don't watch any movie about spiders. Not a one.
Yeah. Now, I can deal with spiders.
Mm-mm.
I can deal with the with enclosures being enclosed. But if I had to choose between the two, I would. I couldn't sit and watch a marathon of movies that the person is buried or enclosed or entombed. They just I couldn't do it. With spiders, eventually, yeah, I'm gonna figure out how to get rid of spider. Fire kills spiders. Fire don't do shit to move dirt. You know what I mean? So,
There, what's the movie? There's a movie. Is it Tales? It's not Tales from the Dark Side. When is it? It's the one where I think it's Ted Danson and he gets buried up to his neck in
yeah,
the water. Like that always was like to just know that you're just sitting there and it's that water's coming, boy. Like that
and you can't do nothing.
you can't do nothing. Like those type of movies can be frustrating to watch,
Yeah,
but those
yeah.
those are the ones that really are like really scary. Okay, so let's talk about Second Side Publishing. How did you get there? Like, how did you tell us your story on that?
Well, in 2018, I had met Bradley Golden, and just talking and becoming friends with Bradley, I was at the time still doing stuff for the World of Black Heroes. So Bradley was familiar with me writing, familiar with my articles, and just things that I did there at the World of Black Heroes. So when he was coming up with the Mississippi Zombie anthology, he asked me if I would submit a story for that anthology, in which I did. The Protector had come out, and then we actually submitted the whole Mississippi Zombie anthology to Caliber Comics or Caliber Entertainment, in which they started publishing that for us, in which they still publish the Mississippi Zombie anthology. And from there, discussions about comics and comic business came. And Bradley saw that I was kind of knowledgeable about the business aspect. And we said, okay, well, let's do this. So in 2020, we started Second Sight Publishing. And here we are now.
Okay, and you're the COO.
The COO, which is just a fancy title, a fancy way of saying that because we're a two-man operation essentially. So it's a fancy way of saying I'm doing the stuff that Bradley doesn't have time to do.
Okay, all right, all right. So tell me some of your favorite titles that you produced over the years for Second Sight.
Well, uh, besides the Mississippi Zombie, and we with Mississippi Zombie, all of those books, all three volumes, have been in the top 100 graphic novels on Amazon Prime. Uh, Mississippi Zombie 3 actually debuted at number one and stayed at number 17 for a couple of weeks. Mississippi Zombie Volume 2 or Volume 1 and 2, they got as high as number 37 and number 38.
Wow.
And then the Harvest of Horrors, that Harvest of Horrors Volume 2, I actually spent 6 straight weeks in the top 50 on
Eesh.
Amazon.
Wow.
And uh, the These Damn Kids title that I'm the editor on, and hey, that was my wife coming in.
It's okay.
But the
Hi,
These
wife. How
Damn
you
Kids
doing?
title that I'm the editor on, we actually were nominated this year for as you see, the sequential magazine for best indie comic of the year.
Wow.
We submitted the book for Eisner consideration and Ringo consideration, and we're going to see how it does there. Uh, Titles that Bradley had written and had published previously that we publish now. The Leave on the Light, for example. That Leave on the Light issue 1 is probably got 15.3 or 4,000 views on Global Comics.
Wow.
We average trending in the top 5, and when you go to the Global Comics website, you'll see Second Sight Publishing right there across the banner.
Okay.
So we have a manga book that's like the number 3 trending manga book on their website.
Wow.
Then we just make comics.
Hey,
We
listen,
are
that's beautiful.
we are we aren't politicized. We aren't trying to run a popularity contest. We're trying to make comics and establish ourselves in the industry, and we're trying to get it.
Hey, listen, I get it. And it is anything I love is comic books. It's my drug. Go ahead, Javon.
So, what are some sacrifices you've had to make when it comes to your art along the way of your growth and your journey?
The biggest sacrifice I would say is of my own personal freedom, my own personal space, because I'm in a position where I deal with other people. I deal with a lot of other people, a lot of different people, and and words like patience, like tolerance, like understanding and acceptance. Those things can't just be, buzzwords. They have to be a way of life when you're doing business and dealing with people. So, irrespective of how I may feel or think, I have to be considerate. I have to think about others other than myself. And, then there's the time factor. I spent a lot of time, I put a lot of time in the comics, put a lot of time in the comic book business, and that's time that I take away from my own personal time of writing, and everyone needs that break. Sometimes my break is not as long as it should be or needs to be because I'm always doing the business of comics.
Do you find that it's hard to write for pleasure because you're doing it for professionally?
No, I won't sacrifice that. I have my professional thing, and then I still have my writings where it's not meant to be something that's published. It's not even meant for anyone else's eyes. It's just me expressing myself, expressing my thoughts, maybe even just practicing writing. As I said, I'm a writer.
Right.
So being a writer and writing varied things, and writing is a part of me. So it's always a pen and paper close by.
Yeah, I was just wondering because I know for myself, I find it hard to write to draw for fun, uh, just for pleasure. Because all right, man, I got to finish this page, or I got to do this print, or everything like that. So I was kind of wondering what it was like for a writer. Like I don't write for fun. Well, that's not really true. I can write for fun from time to time, but not on the level that I think like you, who are a pure writer, like would do. Like you say, you just put your thoughts and everything like that down. Uh, I was just wondering if it was any correlation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as I said, I don't neglect the whole enjoyment side of it, and that comes out through personal interactions with people. I mean, I have real good friends, real close friends that let my hair down, so to speak. We talk, we laugh, we joke. The other day, we were talking about it, playing off of that Key and Peele segment with the racist zombies. We were saying like, well, what if the zombies go to an island like Puerto Rico and everybody's brown? Like they're gonna be confused. What are they gonna do?
They got to walk around with a color card.
Yeah, with a color card, like is it, you know, things like that are. I'm always gonna have those moments. I am always gonna have those moments because I can't take myself too seriously. I'm just as serious as I may sound in my conversation. I'm still that same silly guy that was reading comics when I was in first and second grade. So I don't take myself too seriously, and I do take the time to enjoy reading the books and just enjoy the whole comic community.
So, what are you reading now? We'll get back to the stuff you're doing, but what are you reading now?
Right now, I'm reading the Ghostlight, John Jennings, of course. I'm reading Blackula in Philadelphia,
Shout out to Rodney.
and I just came in. It just came into my possession. The Dark Storm from Kevin Grievous.
Okay, okay, okay.
I've been reading the Mosley series. Actually enjoyed that Mosley series. So yeah, those are. I don't have a lot of time to read, but those are the ones that are sitting on my desk that I'm actually able to pick up and read. I actually have some other books. I got some other books I got from Kickstarter, some digital rewards that I know I'm going to be going through here in the next week. But yeah, as far as the books that are sitting on my desk, and I think everybody has that stack of books on the desk that they're supposed to be reading, and that stack of books on the floor that they're going to be getting to when they finish the stack of books on the desk.
Oh yeah, I got that. My list
So,
is long. My stack is high, and I haven't put a dent in it at all.
well,
Do
as
you
long as people keep putting out good comic books, man, my stacks just keep growing.
do you not work? Do you not read anything from the big two?
And not really.
Is there a reason?
Well, yeah, actually, there is. Like as I mentioned, I was for the longest, I was working with at the World of Black Heroes, and one of the things that I did at the World of Black Heroes was I interviewed independent comic book creators. That's how I met a lot of these guys. That's how a lot of people know me. So and interviewing these guys, I would be, of course, exposed to their work. Some of the guys were artists or writers who've written mainstream, but the vast majority were people who had their own independent comics. And once I got into the habit of supporting the indies, buying the indie comic books, it just became easier for me to just find an indie comic book that's telling the type of story or have the type of characters that I'm looking for versus looking at what the big two is putting out, which is pandering to consumers. I mean, I might be wrong for saying that,
Why
sorry,
do you why do you
but
think it's pandering? I'm just curious.
because they are a business, and as I explained, the readership turns into consumers,
Right.
and the comic books turns into units. So it's about how many units did you push. If your book doesn't push X amount of units, that's why they're canceled. That's why books get canceled. So the consumerism part can't be overlooked. And for companies such as Marvel and DC, and I have this conversation quite often with publishers. You look at their model. They don't publish other people's stuff. They aren't about independent comic book creators. They only publish their stuff. If you work for Marvel, you're writing, drawing a Marvel character. If you work for DC, you're writing, drawing a DC character. If you bring a character into Marvel or DC, it's their character.
Right. Right. Right.
They aren't about independence. They're about themselves, which means they have to remain profitable, which means they have to dive deeply into consumerism.
I get that. I get that. I do think there's a little bit of that. I do. I feel like they're always on the razor's edge, right? Um, because I do think there's a contingent within Marvel and DC that they want to diversify and they want to kind of grow and evolve. But then I agree, there's the other side that's like dollars and cents and units. And I think those are always clashing. So sometimes you'll get something really great and it might last for a little bit, but it might not last for long. You know what I mean? So it'll be like a shooting star. Like, okay, that was great, well, and then it's gone. So
Well, there are times they work in harmony, and when they do work in harmony, you're able to get a Eve Ewing
right.
writing, that's writing Black Panther. You're able to get these writers that we want to see writing our characters or writing certain characters
Right.
in these positions because of the efforts of those folks that want that organic diversity along with the folks who see the value in doing it. The problem is the value always outweighs things.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And that's the whole and that's
corporate. It's corporate.
it's corporate, and that's the whole design of the model. They're corporate, so that bottom line is always going to be the thing. And if the bottom line is not moving upward, then you have to correct the course in some kind of way where that bottom line is moving in the right direction. So that's why they have to stay with consumerism.
Right. And I
But
think that's
when
kind of
they
like but that's any company, like the bigger you
yeah,
get, the more especially if you get stakeholders and I feel like once you get stakeholders involved, that
yeah.
creativity is going to take a hit.
Yeah, once you're messing with other people's money, they want to see a return on their money, which means they want you to do whatever you need to do to so they can get a return on their
Right.
money. And so if that means you need to write some more black characters and hire some more black people, then get the writing, get the hiring, because I want to see a return on my investment.
All right. Go ahead, Jamari.
So again, that struggle just seems to get in the way of everything. Do you think that's going? Where do you think that's going to take comics from here on?
That's a good question.
Well, it's business, and as long as there is comic business, you're going to have to deal with that consumerism.
To some fashion,
The,
that's absolutely
and
true. Do you think that's going
so
to
the
drive it?
balance, the
Okay.
the balance for that is the actual creators themselves making that conscientious effort to connect with the readership, to let the readership know that they aren't just consumers of a product, but they are a person that purchased a, a book that they either drew in, that they either wrote in, that they recognize that this person spent their money and because they could have bought something else or used the money in some other form of fashion. So it's up to those creators, those writers, those artists to work that balance, to let to let the readers know it isn't just a business. The industry just isn't just some cold thing that's looking to move units to consumers. That they appreciate the effort and the money and the time and the fans and everything else connected with making a book popular.
So going off what you just said, this is why, and I've kind of shared this with other people, but this is why I think the independent scene is going to see a dramatic, what's the word I'm looking for, uprising regarding readership. Because like you said, Marvel is, they're about, they're telling stories, but there is a little bit about there's money involved. There's needing to be beholden to, their corporate backers and whatnot and wherefore. And then you have anime, which is and manga, excuse me, which is on the rise. And I think we're gonna see a lot more readers looking for something different, and they'll find it in all these independent people that are putting out this great stuff that's not like Marvel, that's unpredictable, that can be anything, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
Well, you think about things in terms of the growth of small business. Like you see consumers moving away from Walmart and Sears and all these other big places and going now to these online businesses. The small business owner who's able to get his goods or products into some type of distribution or some type of wares where they got marketing and advertising behind it and it's reaching the consumers. People just in general are more so willing now to support small business, independent business versus that big corporate model that we once relied on. So we're at a time where, as a comic book creator, a person is going to give me a second, even a third look at the books that I have, versus just going straight for Marvel or straight for DC. You have those readers. Marvel and DC are going to, they're always going to have their fans,
Yeah.
but
Oh yeah.
that's not to say that an independent person can't create his own fan base as well.
I get that. I agree with you. 100% agree with you. 100%. 100%. Which is why that's why I'm saying the independent market is going to it's going there's going to be a growth there. Like there's going to be a what do you call it? There's going to be people. It's going to be a thirst for it, and I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to the only problem with that is the more successful the indie person gets, it sometimes the trade off is, you know, uh, you start caring less about the story and caring more about, you know, trying to appease people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and this is just my own opinion, but I think as people try to move toward being prolific, trying to move toward, putting out more and more books and titles, uh, you do tend to lose some things there. But some advice that was given to me early on was that, instead of trying to build this 40 book universe, just take one or two titles and make those the best things that they can be and sell those.
Right, right.
Because
But
think about everything that somebody like Todd McFarlane, for example, has written, but he only has one title that's the longest running. Same thing with Eric Larson. He only has everything that he has written, but he only has that one title that's the long running title. So, looking at things in terms of that, uh, I can stick with my book, The Protector, and just continue writing The Protector, and I may end up writing 100, 200 issues of just The Protector.
so that's a great segue. Tell us about the Protector.
The Protector started out as a a small 8-page exercise. Uh, One of the groups that I'm an administrator in on Facebook, we were talking about creating a mythology, creating your own characters and developing a mythology from that, and writing a small or a short story. So the Protector started out as a 8-page story of me building a mythology around this character, Dumbara. And it went from 8 pages to a 30-page book. And then from the 30-page book, uh, with volume two, I came upon 40 pages. But the stories are about the warrior Dumbar, as I mentioned, who was exiled from his tribe, and his dying wish was that he could be the eternal protector of this tribe. So we traced Dumbar and in his role as a protector from around 500 AD into modern times.
Okay. All right. That's awesome. And they can get this on Second Sight Publishing, right?
Yes, secondsightpublishing.com is right there in our web store.
Okay. 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 All right. Go ahead, Jamari.
I was actually just listening to him give us a pitch. Let me ask you this: what you go to conventions and events, right? You sell
Yes.
a book there. What has your experience with that been? So throughout the years, because you've probably seen events from their infancy, and you've quite possibly seen been able to compare them from what they used to be to what they are now. What's that experience been like, both as a consumer and as a creator?
Well, the one thing about where I'm at, I'm in Florida, and the one thing about being here in Florida, as it relates to the comic book conventions, is that there's probably 5 or 6 conventions in a month, almost every month. So you have the opportunity to be seen frequently. You have the opportunity to actually get out and meet fans, and people now become familiar with you and your book. So I had the experience where one con individual came in, walked straight to my table, and said, "Hey, all right, I got volume 1 from you at a con last year. Now I'm back this year to get volume 2." So you run into a lot of that. And if you are fortunate enough to be with a con from its infancy, like here where I stay in Lakeland, the Central Florida Comic Convention, I've been attending that from year 1, and it's been 5 years now. So now, I is what I consider the hometown con. Is actually a central location where people know I'm going to be. So if they miss me in Orlando or miss me in Tampa or Ocala or someplace like that, they know I'm going to be at the Lakeland Con.
How far out of Florida do you go to other cons, or do you?
Yeah, I've been as far up as Detroit
Oh
and as
wow!
far out as Mississippi. As a matter of fact, and I was just talking with a person about this evening before I joined the podcast. When the pandemic hit, I still traveled to cons. In 2020, I went to Knoxville, Tennessee. In 2021, I was in Tupelo. And last year, I was in Alabama. This year, I'm going back up to, well, I'm going actually to Philly. So,
Okay. Oh, wait,
yeah, I
what you going to Fan Expo Philly?
Yeah, no, actually, next week I mentioned the Glyph Awards ceremony.
Oh, okay, okay,
Uh, the Glyph ceremony is Friday, and
okay.
then the Ekbot convention is Saturday,
Right, right.
and I'll be there in Philadelphia for that.
I almost ended up going to ECPOC. I almost ended up going to ECPOC. Ended up going to a different one. I just couldn't do. I couldn't. I was like, man, I can't do. I can't drive up to Philly for a day. Like, no, that's a 4 hour drive for me, man. I ain't trying to do that. Not for no day. Um,
I hear you, man. Well, speaking about cons, that's something that I have always been strategic about. Now, I will go out of state for something that I consider to be big or special. But here in the state, because we have so many cons and what I call the just my I-4 corridor radius, which Daytona, which is on the east coast of Florida, it is about an hour and a half away from me. I stay closest to the west coast, but the same thing in relation on the west coast would be Ocala. The same thing going down south would be like Cocoa.
Okay.
The same thing going north would be like Jacksonville. So, or not Jacksonville, sorry, but uh, it would be, well, Ocala is more northwestern. Anyway, I do that radius, that hour and a half, 2 hour radius where I drive back and forth to cons. And just within that, just that region alone, there are a lot of cons that I attend that are mid-sized, that are small, that are gigantic. MegaCon is right in Orlando, which
I'm trying
is
to get there.
uh, about 45 minutes away from me, and that's the
Okay.
second largest con in the country. Uh, Even something like the Florida SuperCon down in Miami, Miami is 3.5 hours away. So those are huge cons. The Tampa Bay Comic Convention, that's another huge con. So I have all this stuff happening here in this state. So it's hard to really go out of state when I have so many big cons in state. But the thing that we're missing here in the state of Florida is a big black themed con. And by that, I mean a convention that's along the lines of like the Motor City Con with Andre
Right.
Batts, with Ekbach that's happening. And we need something along those lines that draws in all the black comic creators here in the state. That's a space for the black comic community here in the state. And maybe one day we'll get something like that going. There have been a couple of attempts, and they were successful, but now the consistency is needed.
Okay. All right. So I know you're a busy, man. So what you have coming up that you want to tell people about?
Well, as I said, right now I'm on my con circuit, so I have the Ekbach on the 20th. I have the Tampa Bay Comic and Toy Show June 4th. And then I have Florida SuperCon, which is June 30th through July 2nd. And then I'll be heading up to Atlanta for the Urban Nerd Con,
Okay.
and that's July 21st through the 23rd.
Okay. Okay. I'm trying to go there. I haven't decided.
I think you should
We need to make it
attend.
down here,
Uh,
sir.
Hey, listen, man.
not just because I attended the first one in Montgomery, but because the event itself is this is just the second year, and this is the first time that it's being held in Atlanta,
Okay.
and being able to have maximum participation will help in the con actually establishing itself there in that city. So yeah, there are from the state of Florida. I know of at least four of the people that are heading up there. I expect to be there with Tony Cottrell.
Okay.
The downside to that is the con is happening during the same time as the San Diego Comic Con.
Oh, really?
So I know there will be people that'll be heading out to California to that. Bradley being one of them. But we call ourselves splitting duties. Like I say, that COO is just the fancy way of saying I do the stuff Bradley don't have time for. So he's heading out to San Diego, and I'm going to represent us there in Atlanta.
Okay. Okay. All right. So before we go, we usually do this thing in honor of my other show, the other show that I'm on, Top Five Live. And then we're modifying it. We're gonna let the guests do the top five since we're cycling through the same topics, and I can't keep track of what we, Jamari and I, have said. So, what are your top five favorite uh, uh, horror movies?
Top five. Uh, Number one would be Phantasm.
Okay.
Number two would be Tales from the Crypt. Number three would be Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight.
Oh, I love Demon Knight. Love Demon Knight.
Everybody loves Demon
Number number four would be Tales from the Hood.
Knight.
Okay.
And number five would be Blackula.
Okay, Blackula. All right, all right, okay, all right. That's a good list. All right, that's a good list.
Very varied list.
Yeah, very, very. I love that Demon Knight. Love Demon Knight. So yes, thank you for coming on, man. I do appreciate it. I really, really do.
Well,
Hopefully I
thanks
do
for
get to
having
see
me.
you. Yeah, hopefully I get to see you at Urban Nerd if I decide to do it. Hey man, I got travel and hotel and all that. So that's the only reason I gotta
Yeah,
think about it. I gotta make the money work. Um
I
uh,
hear you. Well,
we'll see.
I'm not a spokesperson for the con, anything of that nature. But my friend Rod Godfrey is one of the coordinators there, and I know the tables aren't expensive there in Artist Alley. So that's one thing I can say from the inception. They do things with the comic creator in mind.
Okay. All
So
right.
yeah, you aren't looking at paying $400 or $500 for a table. So yeah,
Right,
definitely
right.
look into it.
Okay. Well, thank you. Again, Second Sight Publishing. Go ahead, check out all the great stuff they got going, and check them out if you're in the Florida area or any of the mini cons he's going to be in. And again, thank you so much for stopping by. We do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and everybody, we'll see you again next week for another episode of a Stoke podcast. Y'all have a great evening. Have a great weekend. See you next week.